Welcome to First Star Let's Chat, an athletic therapy podcast. I'm your host, James Gardner, certified athletic therapist, certified strength and conditioning specialist, yoga instructor, human being. This platform, for the pros, by the pros, anybody in the performance space, and beyond. Welcome here to share in the stories of professionals, experiences, journeys, learning along the way. It's a platform to connect, to network, and to be a part of a community that cares, with conversations that matter, experiences that resonate, and generate ideas, thought-provoking, organic dialogue, passionate pros. Brought to you as always by First Star Therapy, Mobility Tape, Epic, and Benchmark Athletics. In association with the Canadian Athletic Therapists Association. It's First Star Let's Chat, an athletic therapy podcast. Thanks for being here. Thank you for being a part of it. All right, we're in the recording studio. Let's Chat, an athletic therapy podcast, the official podcast of WFAT from World Congress here in Maynooth, Ireland. The final crate, the party, the social, all of the things are underway. You'll hear it in the background. That's intentional. We're joined by Tyrone Cassius once again and his colleague, however we're going to address it, Michael Cole. Michael, we'll have you introduce yourself first to our audience. Tyrone, back to you. We'll go back and forth here on what is passion for you and that is necessary for everybody. Michael, welcome. Thank you for your time. Over to you.
Well, so thank you so much for inviting me on. It's great to be here, and what a great job you're doing with WFAT this week. So yeah, my name's Michael Cole. I'm a sports therapist, sport and exercise therapist by trade. I currently work as a principal teaching fellow in equality, diversity and inclusion in undergraduate primary care at Imperial College London. So I'm working with medics, medical educators, clinical educators, but I've been working in private practice and in elite sport for 23 years, 24 years coming up. So my background is in kind of football or soccer at the grassroots level right up to the professional paid level, and also in aquatics, so pool swimming and open water swimming, working with Olympic squads, working at the Commonwealth Games, and I still am clinically active one day a week.
Beautiful. Structural and cultural humility. Let's define it. Let's give it a little bit of rhyme, reason. Why now? What is it for our audience that's out there that didn't have the privilege to sit in and listen in this week?
Awesome. So cultural and structural humility, it's a concept and a mindset. It's basically, it asks practitioners to think about how teachable are we remaining throughout the course of our career. So we know that research shows that things like empathy, active listening, reflection actually drops down. It decreases with the more experience that practitioners get and with age. If we were to kind of foreground a humility mindset, it really asks us to intentionally and consciously take a step back and think about, why are we thinking this way? Why do we have these assumptions? What value do I ascribe to this set of knowledge versus this set of knowledge? Things like, where does the knowledge come from? Who's producing the research? Is the research being done with participants rather than on? Is it being done with communities that are affected? Or is it kind of divorced from that? So a humility mindset basically says, let's think very critically about why we do what we do and how we can be better. It also asks us to value our strengths as well. So it's not a negative thing. It's not always looking for kind of errors or weaknesses, if you like. So that's humility. If we take it to cultural and structural humility, it basically says to us, what does that mean when we work across different cultures? So if my patients, my students or my athletes come from very different backgrounds to me, what opportunities are there for us to better understand each other and work together to produce successful outcomes? that requires the practitioners to look at what they bring to the room as well as their athlete. So for me, I'm a racialized as white man, able-bodied, hidden disability, you sort of say middle class, working in academia, two neurodivergent, gender diverse children. All of those parts of my identity, growing up as a UK citizen, English as a first language, all the different characteristics you might be able to kind of look at me and see. To what extent do they shape the way I think about healthcare, about sports medicine, about education? And if I can kind of grapple with some of those challenges about who I am and how that affects what I do and how I interact with other people, I can look at where I can develop and improve. The structural part is, okay, so a little bit of history and context. So the phrase or the concept cultural intelligence and cultural competence emerged in sort of 70s and 80s in psychology. Okay. It emerged because healthcare providers around the world, but predominantly in kind of North America, Canada, and European countries, they were seeing consistent patterns of worse outcomes for non-white, non-home patients. Yeah. So immigrant patients, patients whose English was a second language, racial minoritized, gender, sexuality minoritized groups. Why were these outcomes consistently poorer? They brought in cultural intelligence and cultural competence, said, right, if you can learn about these different groups' culture, you're going to be better as a practitioner. So really well-intentioned, but it didn't actually have a huge effect on these outcomes. Tervalon Gray in, I think, 1998 was the first person to say, look, competency is not appropriate. It's not an appropriate term. You can't become competent in somebody else's culture. You'd struggle to become competent in your own culture. And it became a sort of tick box exercise. And in order to tick those boxes, practitioners were like, oh, well, if we've got a group of Mexicans, they'll behave this way. If we've got a group of Southeast Asian patients, they will behave this way. And so that stereotyping got amplified, got re-inscribed. And was really not helpful. So the concept of humility was, well, listen, we're never going to learn everything about that culture, but I can stay open to learning. I can stay receptive. And as I said earlier, critically reflective. And rather than thinking about, I can learn everything about this person in front of me, I can consider the commonalities across this group of people, but I'm not going to assume that they are true for this individual in front of me. Mm-hmm. Again, whether that's a student or a patient or an athlete, right. I need to be mindful that they identify with a group that might have patterns of cultural similarities, but I'm not going to assume that's the case.
Got it.
Just to add on that.
Yes, please.
Like that other side of structure is looking into like the systems. So the systems, are you aware of the systems that are in place? So from a, say a political perspective and policies, and the history of those policies. So how that's progressed over time or developed or not progressed over time as well. Are you aware of that and how that impacts the healthcare, the structure and what patients are experiencing, or how us as practitioners are functioning? And if you're not aware of that, it's very difficult to kind of make the changes because you're not sure what the history is or what's really happening. And that can stem from, kind of the governing bodies or, the institutes that our students are in, or that, we belong to. And that goes through sports teams, sports clubs, like I said, the educational systems. Like, are you aware of the hierarchy as well, and what position? I mentioned before about positionality, so where you are in that perceived status or that chain of of power, put it that way as well. So
Can I just offer a follow-up
Of
on the
course.
structure? Because I'm not sure if I explained that too well earlier, but
Sure.
when we talk about the structural side of humility, from an educational perspective, we talk to students, we explore with them the wider determinants of health, sometimes called the structural determinants of health, and within that subset of commercial determinants of health. And these are often referred to as kind of upstream factors. So if I have a patient in front of me, to what extent am I aware of what they have to deal with before they sit in front of them? And a good example to put that into context at the moment in the UK is that there has been a sharp increase in kind of racial hate crime. So Islamophobia, anti-Black racism, anti-Semitism. And it's a very kind of dangerous time in the UK right now. So if I have an athlete from that group or even a colleague from one of those groups, if they're coming to see me on public transport, the level of safety, the level of vigilance, the level of kind of allostatic load, so the stress on their body is going to be higher, and that has implications not just for our therapeutic relationship, particularly because for me, not occupying those groups, how do I engage with that? But it has implications for how they might respond to their rehab. To what extent are they? We talk about overload. Get the guy's name now; it'll come back to me. But kind of that training load isn't just what we lift in the gym and what we run on the pitch. It's that psychological, emotional, spiritual load as well. So taking those things into account is kind of super important, not just to connect with that patient, but also to ensure what we co-create with them for their rehab is appropriate, is suitable.
I want to go a million places. You guys have done, as always, but you've done a terrific job in capturing this. I've been an athletic therapist, conditioning specialist in Canada for 17 years. My experience in this area is extremely limited in terms of formal education. While I was in school, when I've been out of school, we have programs in place. We have online things that you must do in order to be on a bench in a hockey arena, to be involved with children, to be involved in professional sport. My question, I guess, stems from that and my experience, and maybe many people out there, is how do we make this not just a box to check? How do we not just, it's a DEI quiz, it's a DEI online, diversity, equity, inclusion is how it's formulated in Canada in these spaces. How do I avoid resistance to that and being, all I do is look after their bodies, and I do take care of their psychosocial, spiritual component. So yeah, should be aware of this. But at the end of the day, in conversation, in reality, this comes off as check the box, you're good, it's done, put it in the back burner, and that's it. Is there a way to combat that a little bit from your experience? I'm fascinated that you guys are doing this work. Truly I am. And I also, at the same time, am listening and saying, that's a full-time job. How do I continue to be a practitioner? But it's also going to enhance my ability to be a practitioner. So revert back to the checking a box. I don't like doing half-assed work in my life. So I don't want to do half-assed work with this. Where do I go? How do we avoid just checking a box and saying, did it, we're all good?
Great question. Fantastic question. And I think, first of all, I'm going to caveat what I say with a bit of a reality check. So given the nature of particularly kind of Western education, there is always going to be an element of ticking a box by the very nature of the way that undergrads and postgrads are taught and assessed. We can't fully get away from that. So it's how do we manage the current constraints in the current system? The other caveat is that we could have a very similar conversation about something like empathy. Or can we teach that? How do you stop that becoming a tick box? But that's super important to our industry, right? And our interaction with our patients. So there isn't I can't give a right or wrong answer to that, or completely definite answer. But what I can tell you from the research and from experience is that if you have the right conditions for conversations around these topics that are in some way mapped to a summative assessment or even a formative assessment, what you do is you engage people in conversations that they wouldn't have had before. Now, who's to say where those conversations will ultimately lead? As a postgraduate, going out into the career, somebody might not pick up that particular topic again. They may not. That is the danger. But what we hope to do by embedding these in kind of competencies and formative and summative assessments is to give practitioners the opportunity to continue that. So when we talk, for example, I'm in the process now of we're about to implement a brand new module for medical students, for primary care, community care doctors, student doctors, and it's around humility and health justice. Now, once they've done that module, they may decide, well, this isn't for me. But from my perspective as an educator, they have that option. At the moment, I don't think undergrad and even postgrad athletic trained students, sports rehabilitators, sports therapists, I don't think we have given them enough tools to make that choice. Does that make sense?
It does, and it in my head as a practitioner, I draw parallels pretty regularly, and when I place therapeutic ultrasound or a stim unit or dry needling, I'm not healing anybody with those modalities, but I'm trying to create an environment for healing to take place. And so how do we create that environment? It's conversation. It's trying to create the environment, as you just so brilliantly captured, the right conditions to have these conversations. That takes not just me wanting to do it, my coaching staff, my administration, my general manager, my athletes, whoever I'm working with in our environments. That's not an easy task.
And it's not an easy task for a few reasons, but what you do find, and from my experience, and again, the research shows this, that if you take that leap and start having those challenging conversations, they might be sensitive topics, they might cause a lot of instability, or they might destabilize your view of the world, and that's quite tough. Practitioners, we're not super happy with change, particularly if it challenges our long-held worldviews. But my experience has demonstrated that when you have these conversations, the appetite for them is incredible, and the appetite is greater by and large from students from marginalized groups because they live it. It's not new to them often. So I'm not homogenizing a heterogeneous group. I'm not going to assume that it's not new to them, but by and large, these aren't new experiences, but they are obscured, kind of censored, and just ignored in their training. And I always say this, when I used to teach, I taught sports therapy undergrads for 15, 20 years before I moved into primary care education. I would say to them, look, you might have the best aquatic therapy, you might have the best hands for massage, you might have the best clinical reasoning, right? But if a certain demographic aren't coming to your clinic or aren't trusting you and with their behavior, lifestyle change or their rehab, the best you're giving is reaching those groups that are already privileged more than others. Are you happy with that? And the answer is always, well, of course not. But if we don't have those conversations and we don't support and facilitate them, the status quo remains. And my big interest is, look, we've had years of these. We know that there are differential outcomes based on marginalization, based on identity, whether that's race and ethnicity, whether that's gender. I mean, the data on kind of trans healthcare globally, but especially in the UK, shocking. It's absolutely shocking. Outcomes are the worst: mental health, physiological health. We have Black British women in this country are 4 times more likely to die through complications with childbirth. And we know that race is a fiction, has real material impact, but it's physiologically is a fiction. And these things will continue to go on. We'll still see a lack of black and brown therapists in on the front line for sports teams in leadership positions. That won't change unless we each do a little bit together.
Difficult conversations
It is.
typically yield the greatest results.
Yeah.
Philosophically or fundamentally or
Well, the best learning, right? Learning is transformative. But transformation takes a lot of this criticality. Sorry to jump in there, but
that's it. I'm just sort of chipping away at my own, all of these things. And it takes a little bit of a step back to say, why do I believe what I believe? We go through a lot of life as a practitioner, as a human being, just sort of taking knowledge and not necessarily questioning it, and not necessarily asking the bigger question of why do I believe that, whatever, simple therapeutic example, why do I believe that a therapeutic ultrasound is going to help with a muscle healing injury or muscle tissue injury? On this level, it's all of it you captured. I mean, I think we could probably sit here. I could sit here and listen to both of you here on for hours. And again, I mentioned to Tyrone in an earlier session, I would love to do this on a deeper dive as well, but capturing this for our audience at a World Congress where the majority of these presentations are the physical, some of the psychological, mental health, but it's not this.
Yeah.
What's resources for beginning? If I don't know where to begin, what do I do?
Right, I'm really glad you asked that. So there's a big shout out here to some great work done in North America, actually. The San Francisco Structural Competency Working Group. If you were to hit that into your search engine, you will be able to find a lot of free resources. I'm talking slides, research-informed evidence bases, your references, your citations, and some really strong guidance. Now, I've obviously been critical of the term competency. The reality, as we said, is that sometimes if you want to make change with professional bodies, organizing bodies, they might be more receptive to something that they can feel is more tangible, and competency kind of satisfies that need. For like, humility might be a bit vague. So I would say those are amazing resources and some really great work from colleagues in North America there. The other thing, just to give a shout out here, is to essentially get in touch with me or Tyrone on our details, because last year I founded the Cultural and Structural Humility European Working Group, or CASHU for short. Thank you so much. And we've already had some North American colleagues from Tulane University. We've had people from Austria and Germany who are doing their work in around structural competency / humility, and how they gave us some really interesting insight into the challenges and successes they've had in trying to embed these more sociological aspects into what really are quite empirical kind of health science programs, right? So this network is basically to share good practice, to support change, because, as I said before, without this sort of shared vocabulary, without support to put it in, because if you haven't studied it before, as an educator, you might be like, well, where do I start? I don't want to do it wrong. You know, how do I talk about faith and religion? I don't want to do it wrong. And so we're trying to support that change. So I would say, structural competency working group in North America, and our CASHU group this side of the water.
We'll put the details in the notes here with the podcast. People reach out. Whatever you're willing to provide is a starter, at least.
We'll be back after a quick break.
Hey, it's James Gardner here, host of Let's Chat, an athletic therapy podcast, the official podcast of the World Federation of Athletic Training and Therapy. We are excited to announce the next International Athletic Training and Therapy Day on February 12th, 2026. IATTD 26. This year's theme is Elevating Health Worldwide. We're calling on all athletic trainers, athletic therapists, and sport rehabilitators across the world to join us in celebrating our shared profession on a global scale. During IATTD 26, we'd love to hear from individuals, organizations, associations, societies, academic programs, and more about the impact of our colleagues in elevating health for their patients, clients, and communities. There are a number of ways you can participate via social media and in your communities. Share stories. Tell us a bit about a day in your life as an athletic therapist, athletic trainer, or sport rehabilitator. Give a shout out to an athletic trainer, athletic therapist, or sport rehabilitator who's positively impacted you as a professional or you as an athlete. Ask athletes and patients to share their thoughts on the value of ATs and sport rehabilitators in their lives. Create a fun video to highlight you in your setting or community. When you post to social media, be sure to use the hashtag IATTD26 and tag us.
And of course, I forgot our 2023 editorial in the British Journal of Sports Medicine about why structural humility is needed for the physical activity kind of landscape in the UK. We'll also drop a link into that maybe.
Awesome. That's great. I don't want to say where did this begin? That's the wrong question to ask. But where did this relationship begin? The two of you working together on this. Where did that begin? How did that begin? How do you know each other? Do you live in the same physical space? How did you end up connecting?
No, I think I'll say obviously a common passion eventually manifests itself. I, being a member of the Society of Sports Therapists, Michael being a member longer than myself, but that's kind of where our relationship kind of began. And then I think when Michael was on the board, setting up our society's first EDI group, and I applied to be a part of that because I saw the need for it, and then became chairman of that group, still am, and then I kind of we then our relationship just kept building, and we had deeper conversations and understood that there's a commonality here, that we both want to see the changes that we've previously mentioned. And since then, this was back in 2022, so around just after kind of COVID times, and since then we've just gone on and there's a lot of work to do. I'm sure you agree, there's so much more to do, but the relationship is, I definitely see that the passion, I think, is what drives, I know in terms of drives Michael. And I said, the conversations, you probably even hear it, just how he speaks about things, there's a real conviction about it, and there's a confidence and a boldness to have those conversations. And I think what I'm realizing, and I think again spending time with Michael, is I need to have that same level of passion. It's there, but again, it's consistent, making that as consistent as possible, and not fearing the backlash, because there will be backlash. There's people, like Michael mentioned, that won't want to see the change. They're happy with the norm, whether that's social norm, economical norm, status norm, whatever you want to call it. They're happy with that. So our job is to really be that change, or be the voice of change, or the instigators of change, however you want to word it. And I think the support that we have for each other is there, and that long may that continue from my perspective.
Yeah, so I'll go into a little bit of the background. I think it's important as well, just from a kind of epistemic kind of justice perspective, to kind of give a shout out to some of the key players in this. So and then I'll come on to kind of myself and Tyrone a little bit more after that. So about 15 years ago, I started my PhD, and I was using autoethnography, which is basically a personal narrative connected to social, political, current events, to explore why is there this racial disparity in health education outcomes between white students and their black and brown peers, but what is the role of a white ally in that? So that was kind of my sort of foregrounding into kind of humility, and I learned very quickly through working with colleagues and friends on an institution-wide program of anti-racist pedagogy training. So how can we support higher education lecturers to understand concepts like whiteness, It's not just about skin color. It doesn't mean that you haven't, if you're white, you haven't tried, or you haven't struggled, or you haven't got to your position through hard work. It doesn't mean any of those things. So a lot of education around that, facilitating understanding. And then what does that mean for teaching? So how could you adapt, change your teaching practices so that they are more inclusive, so they do build on the learning of the existing knowledge of students in front of you. So that all progressed, and I co-wrote a chapter with Anna Caffrey, who is a healthcare lecturer and specialist at the University of East London. And that was in the Routledge Handbook of Sports Therapy. And our chapter was on basically calling or advocating for a structural humility approach in physical therapy. Subsequent to that, and as part of the new EDI group that I started at the Society of Sports Therapists, Tyrone and I and a couple of colleagues co-wrote that BJSM editorial on structural humility. And then just one more really important shout out that had huge support from my current faculty and line manager at Imperial College London, Professor Artie Maney, who is just a legend in health coaching. Check out her book. But also a colleague, Dr. Na Okante, who has been working with me to take the development of this concept on. So culture and structural humility has really benefited from a collaborative approach. And when we talk about humility, collaboration is absolutely front and center. So all the work I do, I think I've had one chapter which is a sole authorship. I'm not interested in that. I'm not interested in how we can work together to make change. That's really important to me and to us. And then Tyrone alluded to it earlier about sort of talking about being more consistent in what we do with the privileged power we have and the passion that we have. And when I go around to universities and different health-related private companies to talk about humility, one of the things we sort of help them understand is this concept of praxis, Praxis, right? It's South American critical scholars like Paulo Freire who originated the term, but it basically means once we know a little bit more, what do we do with that information? Because there has to be some action behavior, there has to be something we do with it, and we have to reflect on the impact of that and that continuous cycle. Right. So without the practice part, we could talk about this on a podcast and it might sound great and lovely and inclusive, but then what do we do tomorrow with that patient? What do we do? And this is different for everybody, by the way. So sometimes people will hear that, oh, where do I start with that? What do I have to actually, do I have to go out and start an EDI committee? It's whatever works for you at that moment in time. That's the humility part. It may be that you're stimulated to read a little bit more of something different. And that could be sports medicine related. It could be a paper on a topic like humility or implicit bias or differential outcomes for certain groups, or what's trans affirmative care, what's neuro affirmative care. Well, if that is where you start and all you have time and energy for at the moment, that's amazing. Right? So yeah, it's all about broadening and understanding, inviting conversations, and allowing people that sort of self-compassion and permission to start where you are.
So this is Tyrone Cassius, Michael Cole. I could sit here and learn and listen and have at least 10 different ways to start this tomorrow, just based off this single conversation. And a big piece in this for me is always reflective. And this is a World Congress where I didn't know that I would have this conversation, and I am truly humbled and grateful for the work that you're doing and for the opportunity to meet you both, to put this out there and get this to people and to open this up for conversations wherever you are, listeners. 1, 10, 10,000. This is the beginning. What are you going to do with it? why do I believe what I believe? And beyond that, what do I do with it next in my space to make it relevant to me? I'll let you guys close this out however you like. I don't want to take up too much of your time. There is beautiful music in the background. Resources, connectivity, we'll put up in the podcast notes here. Truly grateful, humbled to sit in your presence and within your work and your expertise. Thank you so much. Over to you.
Well, thank you. That's very, very kind of you. And just to say, the feeling is absolutely mutual. It's a real privilege to sit here with you and also to have seen some of your work as well. So super, super privileged to be able to speak with you about this topic. I think for me, I'm going to leave with just kind of one thing before passing over to Tyrone, which is I've seen a lot lately in healthcare, medicine, sports med around cultural competence. And I want to say two things about that. It's fantastic. It's necessary. It's urgent, but it has its limitations. Humility is where you can take the concept of cultural competence and really create some sustainable ethical change. And a good summary for me is to say, look, if you're thinking about other, and I'm kind of doing the inverted commas with my fingers here, if you're talking about other groups, think about why they are called other. And consider, but don't assume based on that grouping.
No, I agree. I think the last thing I want to leave people with is know what you know and know what you don't know. I think, as therapists, we can be really, I'd say, very, very quick to give knowledge and just give so much information that we then lack the humility to accept that we don't know everything about someone. And clients, patients, even students will come to us as practitioners, lecturers, educators for knowledge. And we can sometimes try and give them everything, and even everything that we actually don't know about. So I think that's where that humility comes in, to just say, you know what, I'm not, and I use that word, competent, or I'm not confident, however you want to word it, in this particular area. So be confident that you don't know that, but be confident that you can still learn about that. Us as professionals are never finished with learning. And I think that's the joy of this whole concept, is that it's literally you reflecting that I'm at a point where I know this, but I may not know this. So how do I address that lack of knowledge or understanding or competency? And then it's having the humility to then want to seek that out. And I think that is the difference between, this is my opinion, this is the difference between being good and great. So that would be my take home, is to be better. Yeah. Just have that humility in you to continue to grow and continue to learn in this specific area that we've talked about.
Thank you both for your time and the work you're doing.
Appreciate it. No worries. Thank you.
Thanks again for being here. Thanks for listening. Thanks for being a part of this community. Check us out online, firststartherapy.com. That's FIRSTAR therapy.com. Or email us with feedback, consult@firststartherapy.com. CONSULT@firststartherapy.com. On Instagram @firststar.therapy, and our podcast host @letschat.at. This is First Star Let's Chat, an athletic therapy podcast.